Chapter 5. Nature and the Environment. England has some exciting and beautiful cities, and many interesting sights. But for a lot of people, the best thing about England is its countryside. Mostly, England is a place of green hills, but it also has lakes, rivers, a long coastline that is very different in different parts of the country, and, in the north, mountains. Because there are so many different kinds of environments in England, there is a lot of wildlife too. Around the coast you can see seals, sharks, dolphins and otters, and rabbits, foxes, squirrels and deer are just some of the animals that move around the countryside freely. Nearly 230 different kinds of birds live in England, and another 200 visit for part of the year. There are also many different kinds of trees, plants and wild flowers growing in the English countryside. The weather in England is temperate, almost never very, very hot or very, very cold, with lots of rain all year. It is usually warmest between June and September, but the weather in any month can be very different from year to year. England has 10 national parks, beautiful areas of countryside where special laws keep the land and the wildlife safe. The biggest of these is the Lake District, in the northwest of England. The Lake District has the highest mountains in the country, with 16 big lakes lying below them. With its beautiful scenery, the Lake District is not surprisingly a very popular place for tourists. Most visitors come to walk in the mountains, to go on boats on the lakes, and to enjoy the area's pretty stone-built villages. There is also a lot of wildlife in the Lake District, and it is the only place in the country where golden eagles, birds of prey, live. In the 18th and 19th centuries, many poets began to write about the Lake District. The most famous of these was William Wordsworth, who lived there for 60 years. The poems and books that he wrote about the Lake District made many people come and visit the area for the first time. Another famous writer from the Lake District is Beatrix Potter, whose children's books about Peter Rabbit and his friends are famous around the world. Today, a lot of tourists visit the house near Hawks Head, where she wrote many of her books. There are 4 other national parks in the north of England. The Peak District, the Yorkshire Dales, and the Northumberland National Park are all part of the Pennines, an area of low mountains in the middle of the north of England. The Pennine Way, a walking trail 429 kilometres long, goes along these mountains, which make a kind of natural border between east and west. East of the Pennines is the north of England's other national park, the North York Moors, between York in the south and Middlesbrough in the north. In all these northern national parks you can find deep valleys covered with forests, high moorland, and wonderful caves, natural holes in the rock in the hillside, and they are great places for walking, cycling, or horse riding. People who have read Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, or any of the other books by Charlotte, Emily, and Anne Bronte, probably feel that they already know the countryside of the Pennines. The Bronte sisters lived in Haworth, in Yorkshire, and they describe the windy, heather-covered moorland of this area in many of their books. The history of the New Forest, about 100 kilometres southwest of London, begins more than 900 years ago. William the Conqueror wanted this area to be kept for hunting, and he and his nobles enjoyed looking for deer and other animals here. Parts of the New Forest, which is now a national park, have probably not changed very much since these times. Today, cows walk freely around this area, with its ancient trees and open land covered with heather. Visitors here can also see beautiful wild flowers, deer, and big birds of prey. But most famous are the ponies, about 3,000 of them that live in the New Forest, as they have for many years. You can often see them walking around the villages of the New Forest, and you must be ready to stop your car when one decides to cross the road. Between Exeter and Plymouth, the National Park of Dartmoor in Devon is the biggest and wildest area of open countryside in the south of England. A lot of Dartmoor is moorland and covered in heather, but Dartmoor is also famous for its many tors, hills with rocks at the top. Sheep, cows and ponies walk freely around on Dartmoor, and many birds live here too. North of Dartmoor is the National Park of Exmoor, a beautiful area of moorland, forests, valleys and farmland, which goes across the counties of Somerset and Devon, right up to the coast. Here you can see otters in nearly every river, wild red deer, bats, and some very special butterflies. Devon is not only famous for Dartmoor and Exmoor. The counties of Devon and Cornwall are very popular with tourists because of their lovely countryside, and because they get more hours of sunlight than anywhere else in England. Away from the coast, the green fields are full of wild flowers in the summer, and narrow little roads with tall hedges at the side go from one pretty village to the next. By the sea, there are golden beaches and little rocky coves, and on the north coast, the big waves in places like Newquay make surfing a very popular sport. Off the coasts of Devon and Cornwall, you can see basking sharks and porpoises, and on Lundy Island there are puffins in April and May. Another beautiful area to visit in this part of England are the Scilly Isles, about 100 small islands 45 kilometres away from Land's End, in England's far southwest corner. Each island is very different, and people live on only 5 of them. Along England's south coast, big white cliffs, large rocks next to the sea, look out onto the English Channel. The rocks in the cliffs on part of this coast, which is called the Jurassic Coast, and goes from East Devon to Dorset, are 185 million years old. Here you can easily find wonderful fossils, rocks with the shape of animals and plants from ancient times. You can see lots of fossils here because of erosion. The rock is very soft, and every day the sea breaks bits of the rock away from the cliffs. Erosion has made parts of this coast very beautiful. The perfect little cove at Lulworth in Dorset and the famous arch of Durdle Door were both made by erosion. England's newest national park is the South Downs, which comes down to the sea near Brighton. You can walk through the beautiful green hills of the South Downs on the South Downs Way, a special walking trail which ends at the enormous white cliffs of Beachy Head on the south coast. Most of the North Sea coast of England, on the east side of the country, is very flat and sandy, with a lot of salt marsh, wet, muddy areas with grass growing on them. There are many seabirds here, and also, at Blakeney Point in Norfolk, several hundred seals. This is the best place in England to see seals, and many people take special boat trips to visit them. The National Park of the Norfolk Broads is also in this area. Here, 3 rivers go across flat land to the sea, and are so wide in places they are almost like lakes. Many people like to visit this area by boat or by bike, enjoying the wonderful bird life. England has a lot of beautiful countryside, but there are many problems for the environment. Factories, vehicles and modern farming can make the air, rivers and the sea dirty, and this is bad for plants and wildlife. Many animals also lose their homes when forests are cut down or land is taken for building houses on. People believe that global warming, the Earth getting hotter because of dangerous gases in the air, is bringing new problems to the countryside too. It is because of these dangers to the environment that the national parks of England were made, and there are many organisations that work to keep wildlife and the English countryside safe. The UK government is also working with governments from other countries to try to find ways to fight global warming. English people hope that they and the tourists who come to their country will always be able to enjoy the wonderful natural environment.